Murder in the first degree. How do you plead?
Guilty.
Don't let his weak voice fool you. Joesph D'Angelo is as dangerous a criminal as one could ever find, terrorizing people across California and evading capture for 45 years.
Joesph D'Angelo isn't just the Visalia ransacker or the East Area rapist or the Golden State Killer. Having sat here today and listened and sat that night of his interview, he is the real-life version of Hannibal Lecter.
A sinister sociopath who prosecutors say fakes feeble incoherence, using a wheelchair now, but not before his arrest in April of 2018.
Detectives observed D'Angelo vigorously working on his yard, jumping in and out of his truck and lifting heavy objects. Just a week before, he was seen racing his motorcycle on the freeway at high rates of speed. Now, sitting in the interview room, he feigned feeble incoherence.
In June of 2020, D'Angelo pleaded guilty to 13 murders and 13 kidnappings, spanning 6 California counties. District attorneys gave summations of the heinous facts of each case.
D'Angelo bound the wrists and ankles of both and raped Patrice. D'Angelo then murdered both Keith and Patrice in the first degree by bludgeoning each of them multiple times in the head.
As part of the plea, D'Angelo also admitted to uncharged crimes,
I admit.
including at least 50 rapes between 1975 and 1986 that are beyond the statute of limitations.
His crimes left a lifetime of scars and pain for our victims and for their families.
The 74-year-old is also a Vietnam War veteran and, most shockingly, a former police officer.
He is a cruel, intelligent, sadistic serial killer. He is pure sociopath. He is a master manipulator.
D'Angelo was identified as a suspect through familial DNA. One of his relatives was registered on a genealogy website.
Using an empty garbage truck, detectives collected trash discarded by Joesph D'Angelo from his garbage can, which was placed on the public street for collection. The Sacramento County District Attorney Crime Lab tested tissue found in that trash and developed a DNA profile that matched not only the defendant, but also matched the DNA profile of the perpetrator in 3 Contra Costa rapes and 8 murders in Southern California.
The numerous cases against D'Angelo were consolidated. In exchange for his guilty pleas and admissions and waiving his rights to appeal, prosecutors took death off the table.
We now have moved this monster, not simply from just being caught, to now standing convicted.
COVID-19 and concerns with elderly witnesses were major considerations that factored into the weighty decision to recommend consecutive life sentences for the Golden State Killer.
This has been a very long journey for justice. This journey of passion and persistence finally led to this day of reckoning.
Before he receives his sentence, the survivors of his crimes and family members of those murdered will get to look him in the eye and say their piece.
What a monster, but great police work. It took time to track this guy down, but they've got him now. His day of reckoning is here. Let's bring in Court TV anchor Julie Grant. Julie, one thing that struck me there was this feebleness act that he was putting on, almost like the mafioso guys do sometimes. They pretend that they're senile, feeble, they can't do anything. Whole thing's an act, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. This guy ought to win the Academy Award for that, Vinny. He's been doing it for years, according to prosecutors, and one of them actually mentioned it to the judge. The first prosecutor to speak, a deputy DA with Sacramento County, really laid it all out that this act, it wasn't the first time he did it when he was arrested for all these rapes and murders, that he did it years ago when he was arrested on another case. Let's listen.
When store security detained D'Angelo in 1979 for shoplifting dog repellent and a hammer, he pretended to suffer a heart attack and then fought with them to the point where they had to tie him down to a chair. When the deputies arrived, he rolled around in his chair, talked in circles, and screamed incoherently. Later that day, D'Angelo admitted to the deputies that he just pretended to act crazy to avoid getting in trouble.
So sick. And something that's really sick, especially when you look back now, right? Hindsight's 2020, but think about what he stole back then in 1979. Dog repellent and a hammer. Why would he need those things? Now it becomes much more clear, Vinny, when we know the context of and what was going on with him at the time. And that incident, that shoplifting incident, is really what ended his career as a police officer. And when you think about it, oh gosh, you know, that was something, could have been a hint, but nobody suspected him. Nobody suspected him at the time because of the way he covered all of these crimes up.
It's an incredible trail. Now, kind of sick stuff. He would wear a ski mask and gloves and then put like the towel on the lamp to soften the light a little bit.
Yes, he sure did. And about that with the towels, that was something else that detectives found. This is really kind of an eerie thing. One of his patterns was putting towels over lamps in rooms to create a soft lighting when he would do these rapes and these terrible, you know, incidents where he would terrorize families in their homes. And when detectives went to his home to arrest him, at that time they also saw that there was a towel over his computer monitor to create that soft lighting in his home. So very, very eerie coincidence there. And another sick pattern that he did was when he would find couples in a home and he would want to torture them both, rape the woman. He would use kitchen dishes to make sure the man kept quiet. Prosecutor also laid that out. Let's take a listen.
D'Angelo left the victim in the living room and returned to the bedroom where he placed dishes on top of John Doe number 2's back and warned, "If I hear these dishes fall, I'll cut her throat."
So another one of those patterns, right? You can imagine the fear, right, Vinny? The fear he'd put in to these victims, where he would tie them up and then put dishes on their back, and if they moved ever so slightly and made a noise, they would think their partner, the love of their life, was going to die. And the way he would threaten them and pit them against each other, as twisted a criminal as you can imagine, that is Joesph D'Angelo.
And the way he was caught, the familiar DNA, amazing at this point, right? That, you know, he gets away with it for so many years, and being a cop, I'm sure, helped him understand all that. But finally, it's the DNA that does him in.
Right. And it was really a shot in the dark. I mean, there were so many good detectives on these cases for years who were trying to crack this. And this was a shot in the dark where one, you know, they knew they had DNA at crime scenes, right? They would take the DNA from whoever this perpetrator was. But when you think about a criminal system where there would be DNA, you've got to have a person who's been arrested for a crime where the state could force them to give them a DNA sample. So that shoplifting incident didn't force a DNA sample. It wouldn't. Something that low level of a crime would not. So they had the DNA, but didn't know it belonged to him. So what one of the detectives did, long story short, he made a fake profile on one of these genealogy websites and was just hoping that maybe he would get a hit based on someone who was a relative. And that's how it happened. So when they got the relative, that's when they surveilled him. They went to his garbage, got his Kleenex, were able to compare the Kleenex to the crime scene DNA, and boom, they had him. So he was only able to cover up so much by being the police officer, not leaving the fingerprints, but leaving behind that DNA, although it took years and years to match. Thankfully, eventually, that's how they got him, Vinny.
And then they finally got him in his Judgment Day sentencing coming up. Julie Grant, thank you so much.
Thank you, Vinny.